Today we are here with Hettie Tabor, and she climbed the Rongai 8-day route with us in September of 2015, and she is here to tell us about how her climb went and how easy or difficult the trip was. So Hettie, why don't you give us a quick overview about how your trip went?
Sure. Well, let's start with just even getting in. So once I got into the JR Airport at Kilimanjaro, we did have our driver there, which was really good, and I met actually one of the people that was going to do the climb with me before we went to the El Borre Hotel. One of the things to note for anybody kind of taking this trip is that the El Borre Hotel is about an hour and a half away from the airport, and it's a lot of back roads, and it's late at night, and it's a little nerve-wracking, but we had a great driver, and we just were surprised by the number of people out so late at night wandering around on the road. It reminded me a little bit of India in that there's a lot of people around, so just something to kind of keep in mind as you're going through there.
The hotel I think you're talking about is Kilimanjaro Mountain Resort, because
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. You're right. It was the Kilimanjaro Mountain Resort because El Borre came afterwards. That's right. You're correct.
So you were going from the airport to the town of Marangu to stay at Kilimanjaro Mountain Resort, and that is a pretty far drive.
Okay, no problems. And we got into the hotel. The hotel had the room reservations, no issues. And the hotel was nice. It was a normal hotel with a good, actually, view of the mountain, which was nice. And so I came in a day early so that I wouldn't have to just sleep overnight and then suddenly have to climb a mountain the next day. So I wanted to have kind of a day off. So the next day I had met one of the folks who actually climbed with me, Hettie, and she was from Amsterdam, and Hettie was 65 years old. Now I'm 50 years old. So it was interesting to meet somebody who actually was climbing that was older than me. And we went out and kind of wandered around the town with a guide. We actually had a guide kind of show us some different areas in the town, which was really nice to do before the trip. So we got to see the waterfall there, and we got to see an old village and how it used to look when it was originally created, and then some of the areas where they used to hide when the Maasai came out, and there were some issues there years and years ago. Plus, we got to visit a coffee plantation, which was small but really nice, and quite nice to meet some of the local people. So that was really, really fun.
Can I ask how much that guide was?
Yep. So we paid in total for the guide and then for the 4 stops. So it was basically $5 for each stop, $40. So per person. So it was $20 for the guide and then $5 for each of the 4 stops to give to basically to the area so that they could kind of keep them up and continue with what they're doing, which I thought was reasonable, which I didn't have any questions or concerns about, and our guide was really good, very knowledgeable, and kind of wandered us around through the different places that we needed to go. So it was a good couple hours, and it was just a nice, fun little trip to be able to see some of the local areas, especially since we didn't know anything about the place that we were at.
Did you arrange that through the hotel?
I did. We did. We actually asked the hotel what they would recommend us to do because we were thinking about maybe going to a waterfall, and they suggested this to us.
Okay, great. Well, that's good to know for people who are doing the Rongai route and arrive a day early.
Yep.
Gives them something to do.
And it was nice because it was not stressful, and it was very an easy walk, and it was all walking distance. We didn't take a car anywhere, so it was just kind of nice to walk around the local area and see it.
Okay, great.
And then that night, we actually met up with pretty much everybody else that was going to be in our group because we had our equipment check and our discussion with our guide, and learned a little bit about what we were going to be doing in the Rongai route. So although I had read everything there was online about what we were doing, and you guys had an amazing website, probably one of the best I've seen as far as detailing out what to expect from every day. But we got together that night and talked about equipment, made sure everybody had what they needed, plus talked about the route and what to expect. every day, which is a little overwhelming in that you're trying to figure out how you're going to do this, and it's lots of questions from the people in the group who were interested in what was going to happen and wanted to know just various things about the trek itself. But it was a good overall meeting. Plus, it was a good chance for us to kind of get a brief meeting with everybody before we headed off to bed and then woke up in the morning to take our first ride out. The first day was great. We got a packaged lunch the first day and then took a bus ride basically out to where we started from. And it was, the nice part for our trip here and for this time of year when we went, we had probably perfect weather, right? It was beautiful. It was sunny every day. We didn't have any rain. We didn't have any snow, other than looking at the snow, the glaciers on the mountain. So it was great weather. We deliberately decided to go in a time where it was not rainy, right? So low rainfall, and I think that made a huge difference for us. The surprising thing to me was that the first 2 days for our trek, the trek was actually really quite warm. So I had brought pretty much all long sleeves and could have done with some short sleeve shirts. So something to note for people who are going for the first time that it's, until you start to really get up into the elevations on day 3, the first 2 days you may actually find yourself quite warm in walking through the treks that you do and the areas that you walk through, which is nice.
What did you think about the amount that you hiked each day on that route?
Well, I said the first day was really nice because the first day was just kind of introduction, right? So one of the things, and here's something I'll suggest before I'll get into the walks themselves, when we got onto the bus, we had still a good hour or so bus ride in order to get to the first stop where we started doing our trek. And what we did as a group in the bus was we each introduced ourselves to each other so that we found out a little bit about who the person was, where they're from, where they lived now, why they were here, what they did for a living, and basically, what they did for fun. And it was a great introduction to everybody, and it made the group really, really close in the end because that was good. And we were missing one person, Mary, who had missed her flight. And so she was coming in that day, but she wasn't with the rest of our group when we got there. So we actually started the trek without her. And then started the first day. Now, the first day's climb, we actually walked for about 4 hours, and it was quite nice. It was actually a little more wooded area. We got to see some monkeys and some local people, which was kind of nice. One thing to note is that the local children will come out and wave to you and say hi to you and ask you for chocolate. So just something to note as you're going through there, because this was a surprise to us, and we had no chocolate with us. Except for in our lunch bags, which we didn't realize until we opened our lunch bags. But it was an interesting part of the trip is to see some of the local children come out and greet us as we went through. But it was a 4-hour walk, slightly uphill, not a horrible climb, actually quite pleasant, and a good chance to meet and talk to everybody. So that was a really good day, and got to camp, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but when we did get to camp, everything was, in fact, set up for us. We picked a tent to sleep in, my friend Jeff and I, who went with me, and that basically became your tent the whole time that you were there. So every time the camps got set up, you knew where to look for, what tent number to look for, and find your tent. And then your stuff would be in your tent from that point forward. So once you picked your tent, they moved your stuff into your tent, and then every time you got to the next camp, they had your stuff already in your tent for you when you got there, which was really pleasant because a lot of times you had some pretty long treks that you were doing. And they showed us where everything was, where the toilet tent was, which for me was the biggest surprise because I had heard about some of these trips and that there was a tent for a toilet and that it was something people basically didn't use. But the nice, pleasant surprise here was that it was actually immaculately clean, and there were two of them, and so we always had in camp a toilet to go to, which I really wasn't expecting. So that was very helpful, and they cleaned it multiple times a day. These guys were fantastic about actually keeping everything clean and safe and sanitary and secure. And then we learned out where the food tent was and where the cook was. We met the cook, and of course we met all our guides on the first day, so that was really nice to meet our guides and try and figure out who we had. And one of the nice surprises for us is we had two women guides. And I certainly wasn't expecting any women guides, and that was just a nice thing to have a couple of women who were actually helping to lead this group. So that was good. So the first day was very nice, and Mary made it in after her bad flight, and we actually reintroduced ourselves to Mary by having a person sitting across from you at dinner introduce the person across from them, so that we would actually remember the stories that were told during the day. And it was quite nice that we all remembered our stories, so then the stories of the other people on the party. So that was kind of a fun way to really get to know each other. And I think it helped solidify our group. I think it made our group feel very comfortable with each other and made Mary feel welcome, which was a good thing because she had kind of spent the whole day just trying to frantically get there, where we had a little less, stress on our first day. So the second day for me was the most difficult day, primarily because I ended up getting a stomach bug, and it was not good. And so I woke up in the middle of the night, and it happened. So I don't think it actually happened from any of the food in the camps. I think it happened prior to that. But nonetheless, my stomach was not well, and unfortunately, day 2 is pretty much the longest trek you're going to do aside from the summit. So on day 2, we're about 8 hours plus. So 4 hours and then a lunch, but we have a hot lunch and then another 4 hours. But I was not feeling well at all, and so 8 hours of trekking, 8 hours plus of trekking, on a stomach that was not handling things very well was very difficult for me, and it was a very concerning for me because I didn't know if I would be able to continue on if something like this continued on for me. So what I did, I actually took Imodium. I had 2 sets of pills. I had one which is kind of regular Imodium that I got here in the States, but I also took the prescription brand, which was recommended to us, and unfortunately neither one of those worked. So when I was on the trek, the lead guide, Abraham, actually asked me if I was doing okay, and I said no, I was really having stomach problems. So when we got back to the camp that night, he gave me some pills to take for the stomach issues, and he said basically take one of these every 2 hours until you're feeling better. And I took them that night. I took a couple of those pills that night, and the next day, completely gone. No more issues the rest of the trip. And so one of the things that I have to note for the people there is that the lead guide, he was fantastic. I think his primary job was to make sure we were all safe and that we were all well in order to make it up the climb. So I praise him for that, right, for taking care of us and making sure that we were all going to be okay. And I think, having something that they knew would work. And so I think several people actually benefited from different remedies or different things that they might have had for us. The other thing I wanted to note was from a food perspective, I was not expecting a great deal from the food, and I was really pleasantly surprised at how good the food was. Now, and one of the things that I noted about the food was that, and especially the cook who was really good, was that they kind of prepared the food so that the food was the right food for you to be able to do the trek the next day. So I think they actually took special care in making sure that you got the type of nutrition, got the types of food and carbs and so forth that you needed in order to be able to to do the next trek. And so I think they were quite conscientious about that, and I was really appreciative of that as well. But yeah, never had bad food while we were there, which was good. And then
The cook is pretty amazing at the number of dishes that he
yeah.
can come up with the with just the amount of food that they bring
Yeah,
up the mountain.
it was. I was thrilled, amazed, and thrilled, and and especially the soups were incredible. And like I said, we always had plenty to eat. There was never an issue on food there, so that was really good. Yep. So, a couple of things on the water. Number one, from a dinner perspective, they always have water. So it's they actually filter all the water, sterilize all the water. So they'll always have water on the tables at dinner. They always have tea. They always have coffee. Now the coffee is instant coffee. The tea, though, is tea that they've made. And then there's hot chocolate, always hot chocolate. So that's also a mix, basically, that you add, all of which were really good and really helped us out, because when we got back to dinner, it was always a lot of tea and coffee and hot chocolate quite often. We also gave them, so anytime you had gotten into camp that night at dinner, you gave them your water bottles, and or if you were using a pack, you would give them the water containers, and they would fill them up with filtered water or cleansed water, basically. And nobody had any issues with the water, so I was happy about that too. We didn't have to use our own special filters for the water. We never had any really concerns or issues with that. The one thing I would suggest, though, for everybody is electrolytes. So it's something that was needed quite often for me, especially since I had the stomach issues on the first day. But it also just gives you a little extra boost. And just adding a little bit of that to your water, you can get it just about anywhere. But just adding some electrolytes actually gave you a little bit more energy and just helped actually with the climbs themselves, especially on the summit night. It's just nice to have a little bit of extra stuff there. I would suggest, although some people had the bladders that they used in their backpacks, especially for summit night, the water freezes. And I know you guys say it on your website, but I don't think people understand it. The water freezes, and it's that cold that night. And I didn't have a bladder in my backpack. What I had was water bottles, and even the water in my water bottles froze to a slush. So when you're drinking on the mountain, you're drinking really cold water. So it's just something to keep in mind, right? Because sometimes the tubes will freeze, and therefore having a water bottle where you can take the top off or where you can get to the water even when it's slushy is something you'll really want to have. The other things on the water, nobody took enough water on summit night. So we all made it to the summit, but by the time we got down the mountain from the summit, I don't know a single person who actually had water left. So it's one thing to keep in mind, because I had two 1.5 liter bottles and had used both of those by the time I'd gotten up to the mountain, and then basically had no water coming down. So I would suggest to people to bring additional water, and I know it's hard because you have to carry it, but additional water on the trek up, because you'll certainly need it for the trek down. And the trek down is not too bad, but I'll go over that one in a minute. I was trying to think of anything else with the water. We always had water at camp, so from a other water perspective, not just drinking water, which was always fine. The other thing is we always had water to wash with, but kind of interesting in that I'm not sure what I was expecting, because this is the first time I've actually gone 6 days basically without a shower. So I was not expecting this to be good. And it's the longest I've ever gone without washing my hair. So for the women out there, you'll get over it pretty quickly. So some women brought dry shampoo, which actually was shared in the camp if anybody wanted any of it. But honestly, it wasn't necessary. Your hair was pretty much up in a ponytail or in a hat all day, and you didn't really think about that type of thing once you got up there. Same with the whether or not you felt unclean, because every morning and every evening they did give you hot water, and the hot water was for washy-washy, basically for cleaning yourself off and just basically spot cleaning yourself. I think we realized how dirty we were when we got back down because I literally had to take three shampoos of my hair before it would even lather. So it was interesting to see how dirty you got, but how little you cared about it. So it wasn't really a problem, and we always had the hot water in order to kind of wash your face and wash certain extremities and just kind of feel okay, right? So there was no real issue there with everybody else was dirty too, so that was not a problem.
I think people always bring way too much clothes, thinking that they're going to change their clothes every day.
Yeah, and that's one thing to keep in mind is, like, when I brought my clothing, I had been told about it before by another person I talked to, and it actually worked out really well for me. So I brought clothes that could be layered because I knew it was going to get cold, and you want clothes that you can layer on top of each other, so keep that in mind, right, when you're walking, right? So I actually had it was basically long underwear, but it was, nicer today in the way it is. So I just layered one on top of each other. So on the first day, I'm just wearing one layer, or the second day, I'm wearing one layer. But then by the time we do the trek up the mountain, the final climb up Kilimanjaro, I'm basically wearing everything that's in my bag. So that's 3 pairs of stretchy pants, 3 tops, plus my jacket that I rented, in fact, because I brought my own jacket, but I felt it might be too light for climbing the mountain. So I rented a second jacket, but I had a fleece on and the jacket that I'd rented from them, plus my 2 pairs of gloves and 2 pairs of socks. And it was cold. It was cold going up, but as long as you kept moving, you actually didn't feel the cold too much. But it was a long trek. But we'll come back to that one in a minute. But I think, in fact, several people, we had, especially younger people, we had 2 24-year-olds on the trip who brought way too many clothes and then didn't end up wearing all of them, or would end up in 2 outfits in a day, and it would be a surprise to us. And so we always made fun of them for being in multiple outfits. But it's just definitely not necessary, and it's not worth the wait. So I would say, if you can switch your clothes in and out, that actually works pretty well. So for me, it was just, I had those 3. In fact, I had 4 pairs of kind of long pant kind of things, or long underwear type things, and then 4 shirts and the fleece and the jacket, and that was enough for the entire trek. So I would say, spare yourself, but make sure you have enough warmth for the last night's climb. Renting of things, by the way, I'll mention that. I rented the pad, but I brought my own sleeping bag. The pad was fantastic. I would recommend to everybody to rent at least the pad. Most people also rented the sleeping bags, which were really nice. Now, I liked having my own sleeping bag, but I would suggest if you rent a sleeping bag, or even if you bring your own, that you bring a fleece liner and buy your own fleece liner and bring it. You'll just actually feel more comfortable about that. But I had a fleece liner that was amazing, and it actually did keep me about 20 degrees warmer in the sleeping bag, and one of the best things I could have brought. So I'd say you're more than happy about renting if you don't have a sleeping bag, or if you don't have the pad, or don't want to bring the pad, because this was a way thicker pad than you would ever get for something you can bring and put into your bag. And then it's fantastic. Well worth the money for it. I think it was like $25 or something like that. So fantastic pads. And I never felt the ground. So I never felt uncomfortable when I was sleeping. I didn't have any problems sleeping, and that I was expecting. So there was never any issue there. From a water perspective, one of the things at night when they give you your water, so when you have your water filled up, you have them fill it up with hot water, which they'll do, which you can actually sleep with in your sleeping bag, and it keeps your feet warm. It's a nice trick. So it was a good thing to have as well. So you definitely need to have water bottles.
It's a good idea. I've never done that.
Yeah, and it works like a charm. Yep. The other thing we thought that wasn't on your list of things to bring, but we definitely would say put on your list of things to bring, was for your hands, a brush for your fingernails. And I know that's strange, but our hands felt dirty all the time. And you get back to camp after a walk and you do the washy-washy, but you could never get the dirt from underneath your fingernails. And fortunately, we had one person in the whole group who had a fingernail brush, and we all used it. So bring your own fingernail brush, which would be very helpful for you because you'll feel like you're just cleaner. You can really scrub your hands and feel like your hands are cleaner. So that would definitely be something that I would add to the list. Okay, back to the climb, and I'll probably hit on a couple other things as we go through. Third day of climbing. Third day, it wasn't as long a walk, so maybe 4 or 5 hours, but this is one where we did an acclimation climb too afterwards. A little bit steeper, but really nice, nothing, the next couple of days of climb actually weren't ever something I'd found to be really difficult. And in fact, after we got past the second day where I was sick, but also it was just such a long day of climbing, the next 2 days were much shorter climbs. That day was, 3 or 4 hours. It was about 4 hours for us. And then the day following that, when we kind of went in the desert area, which was kind of cool, we're still doing we did about 6 hours of walking that day. So we went on the long end of the estimates that you guys had in on your website. So we were probably a little bit on the long end. Now, we had a pretty good group overall from a hiking perspective, and you do find that you separate a little bit in the group, so you'll have the faster people, and then you'll have kind of a middle group, and then you'll have slower people, and the guides kind of split up from that perspective. So there's always guides with you, kind of walking with you as a group. So that was good, and you kind of figured out where you were group-wise, and I tended to be up and towards the front of the pack, but sometimes in the middle, so it just depends, and you just walk with different people at different times, and you get their stories, and it's kind of nice, actually, because you're just walking around and talking, basically, the whole time. So most of them were quite pleasant. It's a lot of walking that you're doing, so just be prepared for that. One of the things I'd note for anybody who's preparing for this, because I think there were lots of questions on how do you really prepare, and for me, I think I did the best thing that I could, which is I actually use the treadmill a lot. So I switched from running altogether and started doing climbing on a treadmill, so climbing at an incline and going up to even 15%, where I could run up a 15% incline at like 5 miles an hour. And that helped me actually get prepared for this. So better than the Stairmaster, because most everything is just a gradual incline. So you don't know you're really doing it, but it's enough of an incline that you're getting it, right? You're realizing it's slowly a 10 to 15% incline, so you're actually kind of climbing up, especially that last day. So I would suggest that even over a Stairmaster, because I think it prepares your body to do that kind of climb at an incline level. But you're not going certainly at 5 miles an hour. You're on regular, normal walks, you're maybe 2.5 to 3, maybe. And then on Summit Night, you're 1 mile an hour. You are just walking, hoping you can put one foot in front of the other. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, so how was the Summit hike?
So the Summit hike, so the interesting thing is you've hiked the day before, but you do have quite a few hours, right, in the camp to rest. And then they get you up, you get up about 11, you have basically some tea. You kind of get ready for your walk. I think we had some porridge, some oatmeal basically. But we actually started the walk at midnight. So it is pitch dark. You have your headlights on. It's the only time we actually used the torch lamps was when we were walking up the mountain. And you pretty much, like I said, have all of your clothing on. So your goal is to keep warm, to have your water with you. Other than, whatever you need to take up there, your camera, your, if you have something that you want to take a picture of at the top of the mountain, and water, you leave everything else behind, right? And you're coming right back to that spot. So basically, the nice part was that you're leaving your camp. There's lots of other people around too, but they were always really safe in our camp, and we always knew where our camp was. Plus, on that night, because we're not moving anything, because when you go up the mountain and then come back down, you're actually going to be back in your tent for a couple of hours before you leave for the next place. The guides would stay, they split up and stayed in your tent so that your stuff wasn't stolen. So that's the one thing to keep in mind. Not that we had any problem with that whatsoever, but the guides were actually very helpful in that respect, because it was the first time we'd left with our tents out and all our stuff in it where somebody else wasn't responsible for it. So in this case, we had the guides sit in on that, which was good. We start the climb. You're actually doing the climb, and it took us a good 8 hours to get up at the top of the mountain, just to get to the top of the mountain. So you start, and we got about halfway up, and we lost one of our folks, decided they couldn't make it up. And he had some issues along the way, so you knew there were acclimation issues, and he knew he had acclimation issues before he even got to that point, but he thought he could make it. He got about halfway up. The guides were very good about realizing what was going on, and they took him down. We saw other people on the mountain get sick too, so about that halfway point was when you start to see people have real issues with acclimation. The rest of the group, and we had 13 in our group, so 12 of us made it to the final summit. It was hard, and I won't say, I will tell people, and I told everybody when I got off the mountain so I would remember it, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm glad I did it. I won't do it again, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I'm so happy that I did it. But it is a constant walk uphill and over rocks, and sometimes climbing a little bit with very little breath. So it was not an easy climb, and it was slow, and it was cold, and you're basically following the person in front of you. And you stop occasionally, so we would stop for a sippy, which would basically take a sip of water, or we would stop at certain points where we could just rest for a couple minutes, but you didn't rest for too long because you would get cold. So you would rest for a few minutes and then start back up again. And I think as long as you kind of kept, for me, I had a little mantra in my head that I would say, or you just kind of kept yourself focused on what you were doing and why you were doing this, it helped to get you up the mountain. One thing to note, I had my cell phone with me, but my cell phone was in my backpack. That was a mistake. Your cell phone will freeze, meaning that it will get so cold it will shut itself off and not want to come back on again. Won't freeze entirely. If you're going to carry your cell phone with you or any other electronics with you, keep it on your body. So you actually need a pocket on your body, maybe on your chest or something like that, to keep it warm, so from the body heat, because if it's in your backpack, it'll get too cold and it'll freeze just like your water. And then, like I said, the other part was water freezing on the way up. Be careful when you stop. I would suggest not taking off your gloves. We had a person who had gloves that were quite tight. She took them off. She tried to put them back on. It freaked her out a little bit that her hands had swelled and weren't easily going into the gloves. We got the gloves back on, not a problem. But just something you don't think about, right, is you don't take things like too much stuff off when you're climbing up the mountain. Once you get up the mountain, you can start taking some stuff off. But basically on your way up there, it's still dark and you're still just trying to see. So you're just trying to get up that mountain. We got about 3/4 of the way up and watched an absolutely amazing sunrise where you could see the curvature of the earth because we were up so high. And then we could see where we were going to. So I swear that they start the climb at midnight so that you don't actually see how far you have to go. But when you get to about 3/4 of the way up and the sun rose for us, we could see where we were going to and how much further we had. And it was actually a good thing. But it was a long way, and we knew it. But we continued on and trekked up to the top. We all made it to Gilliman's Point, and that was a good success, yay, and everybody was happy and elated, and basically it makes it all worth it, and takes pictures, and there's plenty of time to take pictures. There was no issue with, like, people trying to get you out of the way or anything like that. And we all got a chance to kind of relax for a minute and have a drink and just kind of sit there for a second. And then you realize you've got about another hour and a half if you want to make it to the true summit. So you've got 2 more points to go to. And those, don't kid yourself, are also difficult to get to. So you can see the people as they've gone up, and so you can see kind of other people who've gone up before you. So you kind of know where it is, which is nice because then it doesn't look so bad, but it is still a trek up. But it's just amazing to see the mountain and see the ice on the side of the mountain and the crater. So it was just gorgeous. And you just continue on. It's all in the sunlight. You're warmer now, and you get to the final summit, and it's just a really nice thing. Now, you get up there, and then you realize that you have to come down. And this is one thing I hadn't thought about. So the one part is when you're coming down, you're walking down that area that you just came up for an hour and a half, so maybe a half an hour to come down to the point where you get to Gilliman's Point. But then you've got to climb down that mountain that it took you about 8 hours to get up. So I was questioning how are we going to do this. And one thing that we noted was they said, oh, there's a shortcut down, and I didn't realize what they meant by that. But what they meant is you basically ski down the mountain, and this is something I wasn't expecting, where on your shoes you're skiing down the gravel, in order to get down the mountain faster. For somebody who's never done that, it was a little scary because I was afraid of falling. But I had a great guide. His name was Innocent, and I was one of the first 3 people to go down, and the other 2 had done this before, and so they had no issue. And Innocent went with me, and he and I, hand in hand, basically, he helped ski me down this mountain. So we got down, and then we got into camp, and I just basically went to my tent. Jeff was already there because he was the first one down the mountain, and collapsed on my bed and was happy to be there for a couple of hours waiting for other people to come down so we could rest before we had to get up again and go to and do another 4-hour walk basically to the next camp down.
Yes, it's a really long,
horribly long day.
Yes.
Yes. It was the longest day, and it was, everybody was in such a good mood, even on the walk down to the next camp. And you have your breath back because, you're now at, more than 60% oxygen now, so you can actually walk, and it's downhill. Now, the one thing is, I had a more difficult time going downhill than I did going uphill. So I didn't get any blisters the whole time, even up to the top of the mountain, until I started down that mountain. And that's where you need to make sure your shoes are tight enough, and you'll, watch out for the blisters on the coming down as opposed to the going up. And if you have knee problems, watch out for the knees coming down, because that was probably a little more difficult than for a lot of people than the going up. But we made it down, and that was good. And then the last day, you're actually hiking out, which is nice because it's your last day and it's your last hike out. But it was a long day of hiking that last day when we're on our way out. So I think you guys estimated about 6 hours. It was at least 6 hours. And it was dusty, tremendously dusty. So one of the things you want to do is have something over your that you can put over your face, like a scarf or something, just it would help. But you get to a little campsite area about halfway, which is nice, and they have running water, and it's cold running water, and they have a mirror, and you for the first time actually see yourself in the mirror and realize, and then wash your face and then go back out. I looked like I had a tan, and we did find that everybody was religious about wearing their sunscreen and religious about chapstick, and we all got windburn. So regardless of what you do and how much you keep on your face, for the women especially, I'd say bring moisturizer with you, because it will be helpful to you, even though like every bit of dust will stick to you. Just your face gets so dry and wind chapped, and my lips and a couple of other women, our lips swelled. So it was interesting. I'd never seen that before, and I think from a combination of like dehydration or who knows, just windburn, it's just a weird thing that happened. But otherwise, everything was fine. We made it down to the bottom. You get to the gate, and we had a couple of people, one person who basically ran down the mountain. That was my friend Jeff, with one of the guides, because he was really fit. But he was there waiting for us, and we all kind of we had different groups, so we did have different waves of people coming in, and we all made it down to the mountain. And there was a local bar at the end, at the gate, and most of us actually went to the local bar, hung out with some of the porters and some of the guides that had come with us, and had a drink, and it was just nice, and sit back and realize now I don't have to do this anymore. It was just a fun little trip before we took the bus back to the hotel. And then everybody showered, everybody cleaned up, and then we all got together for dinner that night and talked about our trip and how much fun we had. And so it was a great time and a great camaraderie at the end, and everybody was excited and happy that they had done it and ready to go on and to do their next thing the next day. So all in all, fantastic trip. Lots of little things to think about, but just amazing. Just being able to do this and say you've done it, and be able to get up to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a great trip. It sounds like things went pretty smoothly. So I have a question for you. I know that you were transferred to El Borre Safari Lodge after, and you had a massage scheduled, right?
Yes, I did, which was fantastic. Yes, very needed. So I got there, and actually there was a Swedish woman who did the massage, so strangely enough. But she was fantastic. And the nice part, too, is I know that she had worked with and done massages for people who had actually done the mountain climb, right? So it was fairly normal for her to know kind of what to focus on, and she would obviously ask you, but knew where to focus from an attention perspective. I'd say absolutely do it. So El Borre had, like I said, it was a great little place, and great masseuse. So she was fantastic. I would absolutely recommend it.
Okay, great. And how much was that massage?
I think it was $50 for an hour.
Not bad at all.
Yeah, not bad at all. No. It was. I was actually quite surprised. None of the prices were really that high overall, right? But do keep in mind you should have cash for everything, right? And the tip. This is something else for the mountain climb. So at the end, you give the tip to to the folks that helped, right? And one of the things they do, which is a really nice thing, you guys provide it online, but when you're in the camp, they actually provide it to you on camp, which is a recommendation on how much money you should tip. And the way we ended up doing it per person that you're tipping, right? So the lead guide, the guides, the porters, person that helps you with your tent, the cook, right?
Yes.
And so they give you recommendations for each amount, and so they give you that again when you're in camp so that you have that, especially in the last day. And what we did was we all pooled our money, so everybody put in what they wanted, and it was entirely up to the person. Nobody kind of looked to see what everybody else did, but we gave them to, two people basically. They took all the money and then split it up based on those guidelines. And then if you wanted to tip somebody extra, you could. And so it was entirely up to you. One thing I did note is that I do think the tipping ceremony, although it's nice, it became this is it, and all they really wanted to hear was how much money they were getting. So it was kind of these people had helped you out along, and then afterwards I felt like people were waiting to see if you were going to give them more of a tip, right? So that was a little strange. But it's not the same tipping attitude, I think, that we have in the U.S., so I think that's kind of one of the things that you realize. And I think it's just it's a habit that we brought over, other people have brought over. So, and I did give extra tips to a couple of people, obviously Abraham, who was the lead guide who helped me so much when I was sick that one day, and then Innocent, who he always, whenever I needed help, he was always there. So he was my guide that was basically responsible for me, and he took care of me and made sure that if my back started hurting, he actually carried my backpack for a while. So things like that, for people who did that type of thing, we tipped extra too. So I think it's a good thing, but just realize you need all of that in cash, and then plan a little bit more than the standard tip in case there's somebody that you want to give more to.
Yes.
And then for things like the massage and stuff like that, you can put that on your room for the most part. But if you want to tip for the massage afterwards, then you typically tip in cash, or you can tip on your card. So it was nice to have any extra cash that you might need.
Yes, it's always good to bring a lot of small bills in cash, because even at the hotel, for when you get off the ride and people come take your bags and putting the bags into the car afterwards, and
there's always a little things here and there, tipping the cab driver, or your driver, tipping them if they did a good job, and things like that. So always nice to have a little extra with you.
And then normally we don't talk about the safaris. Quick summary about your safari, since you guys went on the ultra luxury one.
Yes, we did, which I will tell you, fantastic safari. So first of all, it was the three of us. So it was just myself and two other folks that I know who came over for just the safari. So we did the 5-day luxury safari, and 5 days was plenty. In fact, 5 days was great. And our driver was Fred, and we loved Fred. Fred was very knowledgeable. Fred was in the Maasai tribe when he was a kid and wanted to become, this kind of travel coordinator, this kind of driver. And he did, and he kind of made his dream come true. And he was fantastic to have on the trip. The nice part about that was Fred was also a mechanic, and he trained in being a mechanic, so he knew how to fix a car, which was very important when you're on a safari, because you're spending 5 days in a car. So it's a lot of time in a car, and I don't know why I was surprised about that, but after spending an entire week of doing nothing but heavy exercise, you come and sit in a car for 5 days and you go, I need to get out. So it was nice, though. The car was fantastic that we were in. It was the three of us, which was really nice in this Jeep where the top came up, which was fantastic because you could always get a good view. We had to be careful about keeping the windows rolled up only when we went through tsetse fly territory, because there were areas where there were more tsetse flies than others, and they would certainly bite you. So no sleeping sickness anymore, but just note that these little guys would love to bite you, regardless of what you were wearing. I don't care what color you're wearing. They went after us.
And they chase the cars, too.
Yeah, they do. And we knew they were there, so we would actually, even though it was hot, we would roll up the window in certain areas because we could see them outside the window trying to get in. That's how, pushy they were about this whole thing. We had, so on the safari, I wanted to mention the hotels because I want to mention one in particular. The nice thing about the luxury was we had really, really nice hotels to stay at. And the one I would say more than any was the Ngorongoro Crater Lodge. And first of all, Ngorongoro Canyon, that whole area was amazing because it was nice to go down in the canyon, and there were just so many animals there to be able to see. So that was really nice. But we stayed in the Crater Lodge that night, and I'll tell you, the Canyon Lodge, I think it was. first of all, we were the only 3 people there that night.
Really?
And we only stayed for one night. Yeah. So we had the whole place to ourselves. We had our own butler, basically, our own manager, our own everything, right? It was all just us in the treehouse overlooking the crater, which was fantastic. Best views that you could get. And it was literally, Ken, one of the nicest hotels I've ever stayed in my entire life. And I've stayed in a lot of hotels. This was fantastic. Service was amazing. The rooms were incredible with incredible views. They had chocolate in the room. The wine was free. The dinner was amazing. It's funny because it was just the 3 of us, and it's 3 girls, 3 friends who've known each other for a long time. And we go into dinner, and they've put rose petals on the floor around our table and roses on the table, and every room had at least 6 dozen roses in it. It was unbelievable how nice this place was. And if you were ever going to do anything romantic with somebody, it would totally be the place to go. But even just for us, it was just the most amazing place. And if we could have stayed there more nights, I definitely would have stayed there as many nights as I could. The first place, I'm just trying to remember the names of them. The first place we stayed in,
I think it's Tarangire River Camp.
Yeah, Tarangire, yeah. That was cool because it was a tent, and in the middle of the night, we were woken up by an elephant that was right outside our tent, literally, 2 feet from me to this elephant who was eating the leaves off of our tree. Really cool, really cool. So that was kind of fun. And then the third place that we stayed, I'm going to forget all the names. You're going to know that one too. Yes, the Sarai and the Serengeti, yes. That place was also nice. Outside shower, which was very strange to me. So the shower was outside. It was very cool, but one of our companions, Karen, was in her room, and she was taking a shower in the outdoor shower, and she looked up, and there was a monkey on the roof of her of her hut watching her take a shower. So, that's interesting. Yes, that doesn't happen very often. But both places were really nice and kind of nice to be out where the rest of nature was. And even the Ngorongoro Canyon, we had zebras in our yard when you came out. There were zebras everywhere, and they had an amazing gift shop. So if you're looking to shop for anything, wait till you get to, if you do this one, when you get to the Ngorongoro Canyon Lodge,
the Crater
Lodge, in the Ngorongoro Crater Lodge. The gift shop is fantastic, reasonable prices, and just great stuff. But all of the places were really nice and unique in their own ways, and food was fantastic, and the people were always really nice, and so it was just a really, really nice places to stay. But like I said, the Ngorongoro Crater Lodge was by far one of the nicest places I've ever seen.
I've been to that lodge, but I've never stayed in that, and it just reminded me of The Hobbit. Just Middle Earth or something, just the way the buildings are. Yeah,
with the tree house that overlooks which is where we had dinner, just fantastic view and pretty, and just, we talked to the manager who actually had been there since they opened the place, and he made all of the chandeliers, made by hand, all of the chandeliers that were in the place. So just interesting background stories on people, and it was fantastic. But we saw everything. I'll go back to the safari. We saw everything we were looking for. We had one issue where we had, and this is why I brought up Fred before, being a mechanic. We had an issue with the truck. So we had a piece of, fuel, something that was being held up by some piece on the car, and that piece came off when we were trying to go up, I think, or coming down into the crater. He could hear it, I couldn't hear it, right? And he said he thought it was a flat tire, and so he got out to check, and he realized what it was, and being a mechanic himself, he had enough materials in the car to basically fix it so that we could get out of the crater, get back to the lodge, and then he took the truck and got it fixed that night. So just fantastic that they were able to do that and didn't cause any change to our agenda or change anything we were trying to do. The other thing is one of our companions had lost their luggage coming in, and she didn't have her luggage for the first 3 days. And your guys were great at trying to track it down because it was literally almost impossible to track where this went to. And in the end, it was in a different airport. It was in Dar es Salaam. And it had to be sent to Kilimanjaro and then driven from Kilimanjaro. So the airlines were being no help. So the airline put it on Precision Air, and since it's from Dar es Salaam to JRO, then one of the guys, as part of the guide trip, went and picked it up at the airport and drove it to, this was when we were in the Ngorongoro crater, and he drove it to the entrance because it was late at night. He couldn't come in because at night they close it, right? And our guide, Fred, went down and met him there so that he could pick up her luggage and bring it back to her so she could actually have clothes to change into, which she hadn't had for several days. So just went out of their way to really make sure that they were able to get it to us once the airlines actually got it to a place where we could actually get it picked up. So that was really nice of him, and he went out of his way to do that. And so we were very happy with that. Like I said, Fred was great. We saw, I was big into cats, so anytime I could see the cats, and we saw amazing things. We saw leopards, where we had a leopard who was up in a tree, and we saw him stand up in the tree, and we're like, oh, what's he looking at, right? And suddenly he's going after a baby gazelle. So we watch him come down and go after the baby gazelle. Now, the nice side is the baby gazelle got away. Yay! So we're all happy that the baby got, and then we realized Mama Gazelle was already up in the tree.
Oh.
It's not a good thing. Yes. But we did get to see a couple of little chases. We didn't see any kills, which we didn't want to see, so we were quite grateful for that. But we saw, over 50 lions. I mean, unbelievable the number of lions that we saw. We just amazing pictures, amazing video, and we always Fred always found places for us to go where we would see just the most amazing stuff. So very, very happy with that. The little flight that we took to Arusha, I guess, before we went to Zanzibar.
Yes.
That was a little, the airport, and I guess it was Arusha? No, it's Dar es Salaam. No, it's Arusha.
Well, you flew from the Serengeti to Arusha Airport.
Right? Arusha Airport, right. The Arusha Airport is a nightmare. Yes. It is. You got to make sure you have plenty of time. And this is the one recommendation we had for the safari for you guys is, you and I had passed notes about whether or not we should get our own flight to Zanzibar because it was a little bit cheaper than going through you guys. If we had gone through you guys, then the flight that we had taken, I think, from the Serengeti to Arusha went on to Zanzibar, and I think we would have been on that flight, and you wouldn't have had to go into the airport, and that would have saved us a huge, a tremendous amount of hassle. And for that alone, just for that little cost of money, I would suggest that they go through you guys in order to do that transfer, at least, if nothing else, to Zanzibar. Because it was the difference between having to go out into that airport in Arusha and dealing with all the stuff we had to deal with, which was just, they were not organized, out of control. We got our flight, but it was a nightmare to deal with. But we did finally get to Zanzibar. The other thing is when we got to Zanzibar, we had arranged a driver, and this is not you guys at all, right? We had arranged a driver, and our driver didn't show. And so that was a little bit harrowing because we had to try and figure out, because everybody, when you get into Zanzibar, is trying to grab your bags to take them to their taxi or whatever. And suddenly we're swarmed by people. And and we had to finally call the hotel and say, where's our guy, and find another guy there at the airport that they trusted that would take us to the hotel. So so if we could have avoided all of that hassle by going through you guys for that, it would have been much better. Now, we stayed at the Hotel Malia, just FYI, in Zanzibar, one of also the nicest hotels I've stayed in. Beautiful, beautiful hotel. So I don't know if you guys work with them at all, but fantastic hotel. And right there on the beach. So it's a little nerve-wracking when you're driving through Zanzibar, because Zanzibar is not really very nice until you get to the luxury resort area on the other side. But just beautiful resorts in that area, and this Hotel Malia was just fantastic. So all in all, really great trip. Only a couple little things that I think, tripped us up, but I think for the most part, everything that you guys did, fantastic. So we were really, really happy, really pleased. I was so happy. And again, you guys did the best job of laying out from a web perspective on the website all the stuff that to expect, and everything kind of held true. There was nothing on there that I would have changed. Like I said, there's only a couple things I would add there, and told you what those were. So I think it was great overall.
Well, thanks, Hettie, for doing this interview, and I'm sure people will get a lot of information out of it when it comes onto the website.
Excellent. Thanks, Ken. I appreciate it.